Okay, another kind of quadratic equation. And in the previous video, you learned that this little bit of information that multiplies x squared changes our step pattern. And we're going to just examine that right now. Okay, so we're going to graph all these things, and we're going to substitute 0 in for x. What do we end up getting? When x equals 0, y equals half 0 squared, which is equal to 0. So 0, 0 is my first point. My next point is, substitute x equals 1. Y is going to be equal to, well, that's going to be half times 1 squared. 1 squared is just 1. It's equal to half. That's why I got half there. In fact, when I say x equals minus 1, I'm going to end up getting y equals half minus 1 squared. Well, minus 1 squared is just equal to 1, which is equal to half. And I'm going to end up getting half over here as well. But anyway, we'll get to that. When we substitute y equals 2, well, 2 squared is 4. Half of that is 2. When we end up substituting y equals 3, x equals 3, let's do that here. Y equals half 3 squared, which is equal to half of 9, which is equal to 9 over 2. All right. Then we substitute 4. We end up getting 16 over 2. 8. And then we put the negative values, and of course it's symmetric. So we know that when x is minus 1, we're going to get half. We're going to get the same value there. We're going to get, when y equals 2, we're going to get this value, 2. Etc. 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 We know that these values are pretty much the same as these values because it's symmetric, once again. That's just the nature of a quadratic function. Now, let's just calculate the first differences. Now, remember, this value here changed our first difference last time. When it was 2x squared, our step pattern went from being 1, 3, 5, 7, 2. Our steps became 2, 6, 10, and 14. Now, if I was to guess, what is half x squared going to be for our step pattern? My guess would be half these values. But the only way to really know is if we subtract our y values. If we do 8 minus 9 over 2, which is 16 over 2, where'd this come from? That's 8, right? 8 is equal to 16 over 2. Minus 9 over 2 equals 7 over 2. 9 over 2 minus 4 over 2. Where's 4 over 2 coming from? Well, that's equal to 4 over 2. I just made them the same so we could do the negative, so we could subtract. Okay. Our next first difference, 2 minus half. Well, that's just 3 over 2. Half minus 0, that's half. Then you get minus half. And by the way, our steps are going to be symmetric, right? Minus 3 over 2, minus 5 over 2, minus 7 over 2. And guess what our first difference is going to be? Our second difference is going to be, it's going to be constant. Remember, for a quadratic equation, our second difference will always have to be constant. Now let's erase some of this stuff here. So let's do that math. Let's just examine it for a second. Whoops. So our second difference. 7 over 2 minus 5 over 2, that's 2 over 2, which is 1. Guess what? They're all going to be 1. Remember, if it's quadratic, and it is, the second difference will be constant, will be the same. It won't be the same for all of them, but they will be the same for every particular equation. Okay, so what does that mean? Look at our step patterns. Look at the numerator of our step pattern. Our numerator, 1 over 2, 3 over 2, 5 over 2, 7 over 2. So our regular step pattern was 1, 3, 5, 7. Now it's 1 over 2, 3 over 2, 5 over 2, 7 over 2. It's as if this was multiplied by half, which turns out to be true. So what does that mean? That means our step pattern is determined by whatever multiplies x squared. If it's half times x squared, our step pattern now becomes half of what it normally would be. Normally would be 1, 3, 5, 7. Now it's half, 3 over 2, 5 over 2, and 7 over 2. So if I was to graph it, if I go one step here, I'm only going to go, oops, that's halfway. Let's erase that. One step, I'm thinking half a step. The next step will be 1.5 steps, 3 over 2. So that'll be 1, 2, 3. Our next step will be 5 over 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our next step will be 7 over 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over 2. And this is now our parabola. It's kind of a compression. Symmetric on both sides. If you're curious of what the regular graph looks like, the regular graph starts at 0, 0. This is y equals half x squared, what we just drew. The regular parabola actually looks like the following. One step. Then the next step is 1, 2, 3. Then the next step is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The regular parabola looks like that. So it's kind of like it's being stretched downwards. Okay, well that's enough for this video. This is called compression. And it's multiplying x squared by half.